Hey guys, Board now back with you for another new television review, and on this video I will be reviewing the second episode of Noughts and Crosses. So yes, continuing this, following on from last week's opening episode, which I really liked. And this episode again is strong, I'd say. Maybe not quite as strong as the first one, but still keeping it ticking along, still impressing me quite a bit. The drama and the politics, I think, are effective. And the main focus on this one is that the sort of drama with Sophia, Callum, and also Sophia's boyfriend, Locum, is really comes to the boiling point in this episode as he starts to notice them kind of sneaking off together, or like hanging around together more and more. He starts getting suspicious, and yeah, we see the fallout in this episode. So full spoilers from the beginning here. And this first starts at, they have like a sworn in type ceremony where the cadets are all there, including Callum. That they're doing like a sort of a guard of honor type performance, and there's a speech by the Home Secretary, who's again is really well played by Joseph Patterson, who people will know mainly out of Peep Show. And I think that's really great casting him in this role. But he does this whole speech, which is kind of like a pushback on this idea of like the Noughts and the Crosses coming together. He's very opposed to migration. He says it in quite a diplomatic sort of way. He doesn't like outright like trash, the Crosses. I might have it right. I keep getting confused. It's the Noughts, isn't it? He doesn't outright condemn the Noughts, but he puts in this like poignant type speech where he just says, yeah, sometimes differences are safe. So it's almost like this cautionary type tone he takes. And there's a lot of interesting drama at this ceremony, because we see more of the Ian Hart character, who's Callum's dad in this one, and he's very kind of spiky, and he really gets a rough time from the Crosses. We see more of the segregation. We see him just being ignored and kind of shoved into by soldiers. And he comes up to the Home Secretary after the speech, and it's just his way of like really getting in his face, because he kind of says, "Oh, remember me? I'm the husband of the woman who works for you," and he's very diplomatic but quite disrespectful as well, the Home Secretary, and yeah, the Ian Hart character gets some nice sort of verbal shots in, so it's quite a well played scene. And Ian Hart's a great character actor, but also, as I said, Joseph Patterson as the Home Secretary, he just has the right sort of posture and voice, and yeah, he has this charisma to him which is really suited for the role. But I think showing that he can do either like comedy or dramatic roles. I think actually some of the stuff you see from him in Peep Show as Johnson is not maybe a million miles away from this role. It's just, and this is obviously they're using it more as a serious type character and performance. So really impressive casting, and I love the scene with him and the Ian Hart character. But this episode is also showing Callum and Sephy, who have kind of fallen for each other because of the restrictions, and because obviously at like a public ceremony like this, eyes will be on them, so they have to find ways of sneaking around and kind of doing it outside of the public eye. So they sort of go off in a room together, and she's supporting him because of it's like the day after finding out then his friend has died, which obviously we know it was the extremist guy who actually did that, seemingly to try and get more power. So she's supporting him, and then the calm walks in. And I'll say again, I think the actor playing the calm is really effective. I think he's suitably cast as well. I think he's puts in a really kind of angry, angst-ridden type performance, but very cocky as well. He gets across that side of the character, which is obviously a big part. But yeah, he's from the moment he sees them together in private, he just this is kind of what sets him off, and it slowly builds throughout the episode, and it is a nicely played sort of drama, and I think the pacing of it in this episode is really good. And you can see in the scenes where him and Sophie, like Sophia, go off together, and they're at like this sort of pool with like this other couple. You can just see that Sophia is more and more uncomfortable around him and kind of bored with him, to be honest. So anyway, she contacts Callum, and she suggests to him, why don't we meet at this special club? And it's on the other side of town, and it's this club where noughts and crosses, like couples, if they're in a couple, they can go and be together, they're accepted. So it's a nice piece of like world building as well, this kind of idea of this one place where that they can actually go, and they wouldn't have any hassle. So Callum reluctantly agrees, and I think what's so great about the scene where they go and they're together is that they just feel it's just this sense of freedom and this weight lifted off their shoulders. But even so, when they first get there and they're sitting having a drink, I think there's still nerves and tension, and there's still question, are we doing the right thing? Is this really wise? So again, it really captures like the angst and like the sort of like nervous just dilemmas really of being teens, and especially in this extreme situation where the odds are against them kind of having this relationship. But in like the previous scene, the Cam has like, sort of cornered Callum, and he's like, at first he just messes with him, he like makes this sort of idle threat, but then he just he says, just kidding, we're off duty, why don't you come for a drink with me? And Callum, because of course he's going to meet Sophia, but can't tell the Cam that, so he's just like, also can't I said I'd spend tonight with my family. And yeah, so it says some other time, but the Ken takes the Cam I think that's how you say his name. The Calm. That's it. Takes this opportunity to follow Callum, and so follows him to the club where him and Sephy go. And again, some really nice, like, intimate moments between Sephy and Callum in this club. I think because they get a room later, and I think what's interesting about that scene is then Callum spends the rest of his money affording the room. So, like, when they want to get a drink or something like that, Sophia has to pay for it, so she gives him some money, and I think that's just a good example of the money kind of issue. If they were together, not that it matters, but it's just one of those things where I think the person who doesn't have that luxury of money would feel bad about the other one maybe obviously paying more than he would. That luxury would feel bad about the other person sort of paying for him, like, so that's an interesting little touch. And I do like Sophia's comment when they're still in the club about this may be as good as it gets for us, so let's make the most of it. And they have a dance. But yeah, things really come to boiling point because the Calm follows them to the club. He knocks and says, I'm looking for two people. And he's kind of turned away, says they're not there. So it's like they instantly know, I guess because he's not in a couple, so they instantly know that he's not really, then he's probably hunting down, a couple like Sophia and Callum, so he's turned away. But then later he just goes into a rage. He just, like, breaks through the hotel, like, floor. He starts, like, smashing into rooms just to try and find them because he's obviously convinced that they're together. He's tried texting Sophia as well, but he just goes crazy. It's this really angst-ridden kind of thing. It's a very physical sort of scene. I think the music in it, I don't know, it's kind of a bit forced. It, like, heightens it maybe a bit too much, and moments like that maybe are a bit signposted, but you can see what they're going for, and I think for the target audience it kind of maybe works well enough. But yeah, it's smashing through these different things, and obviously Sophia's keeping the lookout, and in the end her and Callum escape through the window. But she freaks. She's obviously, things have come to her head and she's really scared, so she just, like, says, I just need a bit of time to calm down and think. So she leaves Callum, and the next day or whatever it is, she actually goes and dumps the Cam. It's quite a strong scene once again. He's there boxing training, and she's very brutally honest and just dumps him. Just says, I don't love you, and he is kind of aggressive and hyper and tries to talk her. Says, does that really matter? We can still be together. And it's almost like he's just going by the law of the land, almost, where, yeah, someone like him, like this high-ranking soldier, and someone like her would just be expected to be together and settle down, even if they don't love each other. And Sophia just points out, well, no, I've changed. I've got ambitions now. And it's a well-played scene. I like it also because she gives him a shot in the arm it's not just that she's like really cold and brutal and breaks up with him. She actually tries to give him some advice. She is sensitive with him, but she gives him this advice and says, yeah, why don't you, I can't remember the phrase, but something like, why don't you just stop being so like just so try and think of the phrase now, but it's something like I can't remember what it is, but yeah, she just says, she's basically saying you should just be give yourself a bit more credit and want a bit more, like I am basically. And yeah, she leaves, so that's obviously gonna have a knock-on effect. And yeah, she obviously wants to be with Callum, which we see later on. So that side of the drama is working really well. Couple more small tidbits, because Elaine, who's the other the other Nought trainee at the academy, we've seen her kind of hanging around with Callum. They've supported each other. She has basically in this episode been accused of like trying to seduce one of the superior officers, whereas in reality it was him coming on to her. But obviously this is a biased sort of like culture where her, because she's a Nought and everything, she's just going to get the blame. And we see her being bullied, like when she walks into like the dining hall, and they start making noise and thumping the tables. And she's about to quit. She's had enough, and then the calm comes in after her to kind of rub her face in it. But then she turns it around on him, because she said that she saw him out and on the other side of town. And why would you be in that part of town? And she's figured it out. She's figured out, because she knows about Sephy and Callum, because she warns Callum, then that it's not such a good idea. And so she now has that on the cam. So she actually decides to stay because she can use that against him. So there you have it. I'm not totally sure yet if we need the character of Elaine. I don't know if there's enough yet to sort of justify her, but it's fine what they're doing with her. Obviously interesting to see where that goes. One of the other things is that we get a bit more on the extremist character, and he gets locked up at one point because he's continuing like his tirade. It's like speaking out and his acts of violence. So he gets visited in a cell by the Home Secretary, and they have a little like chat, and they decide that they have a mutual interest. And the Home Secretary says to him, it's actually in my interest for you to go back onto the streets. You want the Prime Minister gone, and so do I. So the implication is that he's going to let him out and allow him to continue his violence, because that's a way to put more pressure on the Prime Minister, because if she doesn't get hold of the situation, then there'll be pressure on her to quit, basically. So it's all a political ploy for the Home Secretary to try and get into power. Very, very realistic, really. You could definitely see a sort of shallow MP really trying a tactic like that to try and get into power. So very interesting stuff. And there's just one or two bits. Obviously, we've got the funeral of I think Danny was his name, the character who died, and there's a bit at work with the Ian Hart character because the father of Danny isn't allowed a day off to go to his funeral. We see because they work at a construction site, and the boss doesn't let him have it, saying, "Sorry, you've already used your allotted days off." And he's totally brash about it. He's totally like, well, I'm a businessman, and that's all I care about almost. So the Ian Hart character does this thing where he swaps with him. So because Danny's father let him have his day off because when he went to like the ceremony, then Ian Hart returns the favour. So when the boss hears about that, he fires the Ian Hart character. So that's obviously going to have a ripple effect at home because they need the money. So the mother, his wife, asks him to kind of go back, but no, he's too sort of proud. So there you have it. That's pretty much the episode. So good stuff once again. That's episode 2 of Noughts and Crosses. If you've seen it, let me know what you thought in the comments below, and I'll be back soon with episode 3. See you guys again soon. Goodbye.